Hi everyone, welcome to Watch This Dubble. As always, it is I, Double, your omnipresent host, your hyperfixation homie, and the person who has been absolutely obsessed with women's basketball. Now, yes, I know WTD is a rewatch pod, but you gotta know that basketball and sports in general have always been my first love. I grew up playing backyard basketball and I joined my school team. And if you must know, I was somewhat decent, nothing otherworldly though. Nothing, I wasn't Kobe or anything. But yeah, I've been super obsessed with basketball. I really have been. It's been on my mind for months now. and I'm always impressed by the feats that these women players are able to accomplish. They step into the spotlight effortlessly, and they always put out a good product. I haven't seen one bad collegiate women's game or WNBA game. And I think they deserve all the shine that they are going to get. And I'm saying all this because I'm recording this episode the day of the WNBA draft. So it's on my mind today, plus those previous months of me watching it. And today, these women, they're going to have their dreams come true, and they're going to join a professional team. They'll get drafted to a professional team. And they're going to get thousands of fans on top of all the fans they gained in college. And most of these women, they're going to become a brand if they haven't already become a brand. It's all really cool to witness. It really is cool to witness in real time. But I will say, though, it is a little bit bittersweet to me. It's very exciting to see this new wave of talented players get the recognition and the money that they rightfully deserve. But I do feel some type of way for the players that I admired as a kid. Of course, those OG players, they set the stage with their play on the court and their activism to get the WNBA and women's hoops in general to the heights that it's at currently. And I know those OG players, they are extremely proud of their work and of the players that are coming in or have come in behind them. But I dislike that they don't get to live in the world that they helped created. And I say world for lack of better words. Women's hoops in general has shifted. And while it's dope to see all the fame and the love the current players get, it's a completely different landscape than the one the earlier players experienced. The OG players, they had to set the groundwork to build the WNBA, to garner a fan base, and they constantly had to battle for respect amongst most of the public. I don't know the ages of you guys, but if you watched the WNBA when it was originally starting up, it started high, then it kind of dropped down, and now it's back at its high. So it's been a lot of, up and down, round and round. So it hasn't been easy for those, or it wasn't easy for those OG players. And I'm not saying that this new crop of players has it easy. They don't. I mean, at the end of the day, there are still women who face scrutiny in their sport, amongst many other things with just being a woman. But they are benefactors to all of these amazing things, partly due to the groundwork of those players that came before them. And it wouldn't be me, it wouldn't be Double, if all of this didn't lead me to deep thinking. And the question and the thought that came to my mind was, why am I feeling so deeply about this particular thing when I'm sure those original players are indifferent or proud or some other feeling completely different than the one I'm feeling now? And I was able to come up with an answer. That answer was nostalgia. I feel that way because those were the players that I grew up with and I admired and I wanted to be them. And I still think of their playing time and of them fondly. But the WNBA women's hoops is a completely different ball game. I think for me, part of the nostalgia that I have for these players isn't just for the old days when they were actually on the court hooping, but it's because they were pioneers. These women were originators. I mean, they literally set the stage. Now, I got to thinking too hard about this. Like I said, it wouldn't be me if I didn't get into a deep thought. And all of it ended up making me feeling really wistful. So I ended up turning on a movie. I went to Disney Plus, which is weird for me because I don't normally go there. But I went to Disney Plus and I clicked on the first movie I saw. And I bet you guys for $1 million cannot guess what movie I clicked on. Take a guess. I'll give you a second. It was the freaking Cheetah Girls, y'all. Freaking Cheetah Girls. And I started watching one, and of course, I watched all 3 movies, obviously. And what should have been a simple and plain movie watch, it led me to more thoughts. It wouldn't be me, y'all. I'm going to overanalyze everything. You know this by now. And much like the shifting landscapes of women's hoops, the Cheetah Girls franchise shifted too. Those first 2 movies, they set the stage. They made us fall in love with the Cheetah Girls magic. Then the 3rd movie comes around and things have changed from those OG movies that we came to love. What ended up happening was my thoughts led me to comparing these Cheetah Girls franchise to the thoughts that I had earlier about OG hoopers and the new class of ballers. Much like those older basketball players, the first 2 Cheetah Girls movies are loved, they're revered, and they're stamped in the millennials' banks of nostalgia. And that's about where things come to a halt. We all love the new class of hoopers. They are respected and they'll eventually become nostalgic to a large group of people once their playing days are over. We all still bump strut and meme Aqua from the first movie, but that 3rd Cheetah Girls movie, it doesn't receive the love like those first 2 do, or did, or does. And that leads us to today's episode. Why doesn't Cheetah Girls One World get all the same nostalgic love as the previous 2? So yeah, that's the journey that we are embarking on today, guys. As always, there will be spoilers. And I'm so happy to not have to drop trigger warnings for this for once. I'm so happy for that. But enough of my cheetah chatter. Let's go ahead and dive in. As always, let's start with the background. Before we got the iconic Cheetah Girls movies, there was a series of young adult novels that birthed those girls. And those novels were written by Deborah Gregory, I think in 1999. I want to say 1999. Fact check me if I'm wrong. And Gregory ended up writing 16 books in total for the series. And in the books, there were 5 Cheetah Girls originally. The 4 that we know, Galleria, Chanel, Dorinda, Aquanette is her birth name. And in the book, Aqua had a twin, Anjanette. Now, obviously, Anjanette was removed from the movies. Sad. The books, and then later on the movies, end up following the journey of these New York teenagers who have ambitions of musical superstardom. And those books were hits, y'all. They were hits, and they caught the eye of Disney a few years after their release. The books themselves, they delved into deeper personal and social issues that affected the girls, And obviously, as we've probably most of us have all seen the movies, Disney kept it fun and removed all those social commentary parts. If you were a DCOM viewer like I was at the time, then you would know that the theme of Disney during that time was all about music and fashion and chasing dreams. So Cheetah Girls was a perfect fit. Now, on WTD, we don't normally name the actors of whatever media that we are discussing. And that's because I like to keep my thoughts strictly about the project itself, the content itself, that we're talking about. But this Cheetah Girls cast, y'all, it is too iconic not to mention the names. Starring as our four main girlies, we have Raven Simone. We have Adrienne Ballion Houghton. Y'all, I'm a Southern black girl. I'm probably going to butcher their names. I'm so sorry, y'all. That's why I don't say people's names, because I butcher them. We also have Keely Williams and Sabrina Ryan. Now, there are no further words on these ladies, besides the fact that I consistently voted for Sabrina Bryan when she was on Dancing with the Stars. Like, all the time, I was voting for her. And I am still sick that she didn't win either edition that she was on. Justice for Sabrina Bryan. She should have been a Dancing with the Star champion. And besides our four main girlies, there were other big names that were tied along to the franchise. We have Kenny Ortega, who a lot of us probably know more so from High School Musical. And then our vocal GOAT, Whitney Houston. Rest in peace. So Disney, they put their name and their machine behind the Cheetah Girls project, and boy, did it hold weight. August 2003, the first Cheetah Girls movie hit Disney airwaves. And in this first movie, if you haven't seen it, the girls, they hope to become the first freshmen to win their school's talent show and gain the attention of a big music producer who is an alumnus of the school. Y'all, the movie was such a hit. It was such a hit. And in case if you don't remember, the Cheetah Girls was the first musical DCOM, Disney Channel original movie. It was the first. So it was before High School Musical, before Teen Beach Movie, before Descendants, before all those shows, movies came along. It was the Cheetah Girls. They were running things. That first movie had over 6 million viewers at the time of its premiere, and the soundtrack ended up going 2 times platinum. Like I said, y'all, a huge hit. It wasn't long before Disney threw its weight behind the TCG, because I'm not going to say the Cheetah Girls every time, TCG machine again. The Cheetah Girls 2, that movie ended up premiering in August 2006. Now, in this movie, the 4 girls are still in search of their superstardom. And they end up in Spain because some type of way, they end up participants in the Barcelona Music Festival. Now, much like the previous movie, TCG 2, it was also a hit. The premiere night audience was over 8 million strong. Insane numbers. The soundtrack went platinum and it debuted number 5 on the Billboard charts. Insane. And Disney knew they had a moneymaker on their hands. They absolutely knew it. Between the movies, the soundtracks, the music tours, it was a no-brainer for Disney to go ahead and greenlight a third movie. And we end up with the Cheetah Girls One World. And it came out 2 years later in August 2008. One World ends up being the final TCG film, and it's the only one in the franchise that does not star Raven Simone as Galleria. We miss you, Galleria, girl. Raven's departure was allegedly due to her feeling excluded from the group by some of the members. So in the final film, we have just our 3 remaining girls, Dorinda, Chanel, and Aqua. And those 3, they're on a last-ditch effort to become superstars because they're still chasing it. And they're wanting to do so before their lives change because they're in high school and about to go to college. And the girls, they end up getting casted in a Bollywood movie and they travel to India to film the movie. And that's the synopsis of One World. TCG One World brought in an audience of just over 6 million on its premiere night, which is good, smaller than the previous movie, but still respectable. Now the soundtrack, it flopped. It did. That soundtrack has estimated to have sold less than 200,000 copies, I believe. Not good considering that your first 2 albums are platinum. And the actual Cheetah Girls, the group that we saw in the public eye, they went on their one final One World tour and then disbanded shortly after, which is kind of anticlimactic, as an end for such a popular group. But the Cheetah Girls, their history is still one to be reckoned with. Now that the background is out of the way, let's get into the real reason why we're here today. A movie franchise that exploded into a chart-topping, culture-defining success. Think about that. Chart-topping, culture-defining success. Based on a book series, it should have cemented itself amongst the generation that watched it, right? True. But only for the first 2 movies. TCG had a built-in fan base and a machine backing them in Disney. So why did this third movie underperform? And a bigger question that stems from that, why doesn't One World evoke the same nostalgic feeling that I get from the original TCG films? What is it about this third movie that lacks the magic that the previous 2 had? The easiest thing to attribute to the lack of nostalgic feeling is the fact that we are missing one of our cheetahs, and dare I say, the most popular one. The absence of Galleria is clearly felt in the third movie. She was undeniably the leader of the Cheetah Girls. No one's gonna deny that. The cheetahs wouldn't even deny that. If you've seen the movies, then you know that Galleria, she was a visionary for the group. She wrote their songs, she led rehearsals, and she was always there to give her bandmates the push that they needed to keep the Cheetah Dream alive. And Galleria's leadership, along with her vocals, it played a central role in those first 2 movies. She was that integral to the group's dynamic. Understand that. Without her being in that final film, the core chemistry just felt different. For me, no Galleria, it created a void that was not able to be filled. And it led to a disruption in a dynamic that I, and I'm sure others, had come to love over the past 2 movies. I think of it like this. Each girl has a specific trait that they brought to the group. And it kept them balanced. One girl and their trait missing will throw the whole thing off, So let's kind of go step by step. We have Dorinda. She's the dancer and she's down to earth, a peacemaker of the bunch. We have Aqua. She's the southern girl amongst the NYC girlies. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind and she offered her opinion whenever she saw fit. We have Chanel. She was the group's main vocalist. She was Galleria's number 2 and kind of the emotional center for the group. Now take those 3 identifiers and compare it to what I said earlier about Galleria. Not to disrespect the other 3 girlies, but none of them had a level of assertiveness that Galleria had. And again, the dynamic just felt incomplete without her there. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't include the fact that Raven-Symoné's departure from the franchise might have swayed a few viewers from watching it and banking it in their nostalgia savings. I like that play on the nostalgia bank, y'all. I'm probably going to say that a lot. But yeah, like for many of us, several millennials, Raven was a staple for us growing up. I mean, she was on TV with us. She grew up on TV with us. And she had so many iconic roles that she was a mainstay in our brains. So we have no Raven, no Galleria. So I guess there was no reason to remember the third movie, eh? Now, Disney Channel movies aren't known for having the best plots. Most of the time, they're very predictable or super simple. And I get that, their audience is a group of preteens or younger. So I never sought out DCOMs for riveting storylines. I mean, literally, younger me would watch DCOMs because my crush was in a movie, or my favorite young celebrity was there, or because I didn't want to be left out when my classmates talked about whatever movie they watched the next day in school. So of course I never tripped out about the storylines of the Cheetah Girls until I got to that last movie. The writing was just flat out bad, y'all. And like I said before, I've never been one to look too deep into the storylines of DCOM, specifically TCG. Those first two movies, they had simple, straightforward plots, but you were still interested in what they had going on. Simple wasn't bad for those first two films because they were still engaging. As a viewer, you were invested if the girls were going to overcome themselves and their obstacles to achieve their dreams. But then we have One World, and in One World, the storyline felt rushed and underdeveloped. Like we had spent the previous two movies watching the girls claw, at their chance of stardom. And in the first movie, we also spent a good amount of time character building, especially with Dorinda and Chanel. The second film, we saw a focus on the girls' friendship, focus on the conflicts in that friendship. And they also had a cultural connection with Barcelona, Spain. In One World, we are missing so much of that. We are missing the world and character building. I don't know what happened in the writer's room, but they didn't world build and they didn't character build. They left the internal conflict of their friend group. And it's because of the casting of the Bollywood film, but their challenges as friends, it felt so insignificant, especially since those issues, those conflicts, they always ended up being resolved so easily. There was no emotional weight. Like, let's take the second movie. In the second movie, when Galleria decides to leave, as a viewer, you really feel the possibility of the Cheetah Girls breaking up. At least I did. I was distraught. You would think that same feeling would be evoked in One World. Because what happens is they're originally told that all three girls would get the starring role in this Bollywood film, but something happens and only one can get cast. So you would think that the weight of the Cheetah Girls possibly be breaking up, you would get that feeling since only one cheetah would get that starring role in the Bollywood film. You would think that would deeply affect their friendship, perhaps even so in the long run. Nope, it didn't. All was forgiven in a 15-minute span. No kidding. And like when it comes to the cultural things, like even the immersion of being in India, it pales in comparison to the girls being in Spain. There was serious ties and connections when the Cheetah Girls went to Spain. I think about it, like Chanel and her mom, they were gonna move there, There was something to tie it, to connect it. In the Strut music video, the musical number, they're literally exploring Barcelona. It's in the song. Now, I'm not sure if budget restrictions or whatever affected them in India, but there is clearly a lack of exploration between the cheetahs and India. Now, we do get some pretty songs and some nice shots in the beginning, and in those songs we have the India infusions, but besides that, it's nothing. But I will tell you what the One World writers put all their energy into for this final film. It was boys. I'm not sure if Disney had to meet a romance quota, but my goodness, y'all, this final movie was so boy/romance centric. It was too much. It was disappointing. Because for me, I always felt that the focal point of TCG was the bond of these girls and their shared dream. One World basically threw that out the window. And they threw that out the window to give Aqua and Chanel a forced love story with some unremarkable boys. They were unremarkable. I'll call it as I see fit. Now, I will say that the previous movies, they did have romantic interest for Galleria and Dorinda. Yeah, Dorinda, yeah. Galleria's romance, it wasn't central to the plot at all, though. It wasn't. Not in that first movie. It definitely felt like something that Disney threw in for the sake of doing so. With Dorinda's love story in the second movie, it did have a more significant role. But it in no way took away from the central theme of TCG. I think if anything, Dorinda's romance helps enhance the storyline because it puts even more pressure on the conflict that the girls are going through. This last movie, though, it felt like fan service in the romance department. It did. It felt like Disney said, if the other girls had a boo, why can't Aqua and Chanel have their own boo? I think Disney may have did that to try to appeal to a wider audience, but it wasn't needed. It wasn't. All that extra time spent on building these meaningless relationships could have been used to give these girls more time together, or at least have them explore their own interests while in a foreign country, while in India. And if you've seen One World, then you know that Chanel and her love interest, they have no chemistry whatsoever. It's literally like watching paint dry, y'all. There's no chemistry. I'm sure I sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but the message that resonated with most viewers of those first two TCG films was taken away by being so male-centric in the third one. Why? It's like they said, why focus on girl power when cute boys can be the focus? Making the film so boy heavy, it really alienated me as a viewer. And not because I'm a lesbian. You know, I tuned in to see friendship and fun and female empowerment and dream chasing. I didn't get all that. For me, nostalgia is all about being tied to core happy feelings. Friendship, fun, dream chasing, female empowerment are happy feelings to me. One World strayed so far from the original TCG message of girl power. It did. And look, I say all this to say, going away from the original message and the dynamic, it does make it hard to embrace this movie with the same sentiment as the first two. As listeners of WTD, you know I like to get the bad and the negatives out of the way. That's why I did it in the first part of this episode. So let's try to bring some positivity to the episode now. I have critiqued this film probably a little too harshly, especially since it is just a kid's film. Personally, I think that it is unfair that TCG One World isn't stamped in our nostalgia banks. The movie is still part of the Cheetah Girls universe. Yes, it's weaker, but One World is still family. The TCG brand, the remaining girls and their voices, it should have just triggered nostalgic feelings simply by being associated with the earlier movies. And speaking of the remaining girls, we should be looking at them in a different light in One World. There's no Galleria, of course, but we still had Aqua and Doe and Chanel. And this movie, it represented kind of their final chapter. It was an end to an era and an end to the group, even without Galleria being there. And even Galleria being missing, the girls were still able to continue their Cheetah Girl journey without her. They were able to adapt to new situations without their undeniable leader. So, if anything, that should be seen as a testament to their enduring friendship and probably on a deeper level, their resilience. It should. Another reason One World should get the respect it so rightfully deserves is because it's a product of its time. So many of us millennials, we love to harp on how good the 90s and the early 2000s were. That's our favorite thing to say. And we tend to reminisce on so much media and media related things that are arguably worse than TCG and arguably worse than TCG One World. So if One World doesn't strike the strongest chord for some, it still holds a significant weight because it's in that era of DCOMs. The fashion, the music, the optimism, it all fits in with what was going on at the time. Even if it was a little bit different, it still fit. For me, aesthetics and style, it triggers wistful feelings. And I don't know what's more 2000s than this movie, especially when it comes to music, especially when it comes to the fashion. I'll also say this. There's something to be said about this movie being a little bit out of the box compared to the other two. I spent a lot of time earlier in this episode saying that One World strayed far from the original TCG formula, but it does take guts to do that. It does take guts to do something different at the risk of alienating your audience. The movie and the writers, they took a chance. They explored a different culture, a different musical style, and it stands out. Some people will say that it's so bad that it's good, but I don't think that matters. I don't think that matters at all. Because difference should evoke nostalgia, especially since such a chance was taken by experimenting with this movie. Different doesn't mean that something shouldn't be beloved. And I think as a collective, we should respect this movie much more. I guess I'm back to my original question. Why doesn't One World get the same nostalgic love as the OG and the sequel movie? Now, is One World the perfect TCG movie? No. But does it deserve to be forgotten? Absolutely not. It doesn't. I think all of us could stand to revisit One World with fresh eyes because there is something to appreciate about this movie. I caught it on Disney Plus, so if you are in the States, it's still there. It's still streaming on Disney Plus. So I recommend you all to give it another shot. I bet it'll flicker some sort of spark in you. And I also want to say this, like, I spent this whole time laying out the reasons for One World to be nostalgic, why it isn't nostalgic, why it should be. But that's just me playing devil's advocate. Because for me, this movie has always been nostalgic. An unpopular opinion, I have this movie ranked second in the Cheetah Girls franchise. It's right behind TCG 2 and before the OG one. Yep. I do like One World better than the original one. And prior to me viewing this after all the basketball stuff, like, I hadn't watched One World in years. I hadn't. But the music, I was one of those 200,000 people to buy a copy because I loved it wasn't weird music, but it was different music. I liked it. It was for me. And even like I said, I hadn't watched the movie in years, but Cheetah Love and Dig a Little Deeper, those songs, they still get constant spins. They're on my playlist to this day right now. Y'all know that I'm currently in my season of change. And this movie sort of represents that for me now. I'm sure y'all are probably there like, interesting take on TCG Double. But it's true. This movie does kind of fit the theme of change for me. Because the movie writers, they had to change up how the script was going to be written without Galleria. There are changes in the group's dynamic, which causes them to evolve. And also because it was the final movie, it showed the change that comes when things eventually come to an end. Like the franchise ending, or the group ending, or friendships ending, or if you want to get a little bit morbid, even lifespans ending. The ability to compare one world to the previous movies allowed me to appreciate the chemistry of these actors and the element of girl power and friendship that are the staples for all three films. In a way, the changing of the group's dynamic, it allowed me to appreciate what came before. And honestly, man, I don't know what's more nostalgic than that. I have been saying that some of the previous episodes have been short, but this one is short. And I'm kind of disappointed in myself. I really thought I would have dropped a lot more Cheetah Girl puns throughout this. But surprisingly, like, it's really hard to do on the fly. I'm a good thinker, but trying to think of these nicely worded sentences without saying too many ums and likes and mans and those, and trying to throw Cheetah Girls puns in, it was difficult for me. But I hope you all enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it, even without me dropping all the Cheetah Girls puns as I wanted to. I think I'm going to go put on the first Cheetah Girls soundtrack, since I said it wasn't my favorite. Oh, you know what? No, I'm probably not. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go listen to the studio albums. And if you didn't know, the Cheetah Girls, they have 2 studio albums that are not affiliated with the soundtracks. So get into that. But yeah, if you haven't seen Cheetah Girls One World or any of the TCG movies, like I said earlier, stop by Disney Plus if you're in the States. They are streaming there. The movies are fun, and the music, it'll leave you with an earworm 100%. And if I recall correctly, I think Raven and Adrian, they teased revamping the Cheetah Girls a few years back. And I would be so excited to see what they would come up with for the new generation of viewers. And for original Cheetah Girls lovers like myself, I would love to see that. As always, I appreciate y'all. You all keep me motivated to do Watch This Double. Y'all keep me here, even in the midst of my season of change. If you want more of me, follow me on X at WatchThisDubble. Double is spelled D-U-B-B-L-E. WTD is available on both Spotify and YouTube, so catch up on those older episodes if you haven't already. The previous episode, I spent an hour and some change talking about an Italian reality show, so get into that. Again, thank you for spending some of your time with your hyperfixation homie and your omnipresent host. You'll be hearing again from me very, very soon. Peace out.